Welcome, listeners, to another fantastic, this is going to be amazing episode of Oh My Word. Bonus in capital BONUS exclamation point episode. Today we have with us special author, debut author, just as of like 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, and that is Hanna C. Howard. Hanna Howard, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It is a joy, and we are so excited. And hopefully, I won't talk too fast because I'm so excited. So here we go. So first of all, Hanna's new book, Ignite the Sun, just came out at the end of August. If I saw it,
Yeah.
right? If I remember.
Yeah, mid-August.
Mid-August, Ignite the Sun. So when we're done, you'll see the link to her website, or the link to all the information you'll need will be in the episode notes. So if you haven't read it yet, because you just have as long a TBR as the rest of us, you'll go find the book, you'll stick it to the top of the TBR, and you'll enjoy it. Okay, so here we go. So let's start. We always start from the beginning. How did we get to this point, Hanna? How did you start? Like, how did you become a writer? And you got a book that's published. Awesome. How did we get here?
Thank you. It's been a really long road. I started writing with serious intention in 10th grade. Before that, it was all just sort of fun games. But in 10th grade, I started writing my first novel, and it was terrible, and I hope no one ever reads it. I don't think you could, because it was mostly written on paper and then transferred to Word documents that I think are no longer even readable. But that was how I learned, you learn to write by writing. And I went to college to study creative writing in English. And then after college, I thought, okay, well, this will be good. I'll, get published.
Yeah.
And I knew nothing coming out of college about the actual process of publication. I knew, things about books and writing, but publication was a new foreign animal to me. So I set out to get published. And I learned the hard way on every single thing that I approached, which was basically just to fail and then figure out how to do it right. So I ended up with 3 different books trying to get published or trying to get an agent. And so it took me, I signed with my agent in 2015, and I graduated from college in 2008. So,
Yeah.
Is that 6-7 years?
Yeah,
Never...
Yeah, that's why we're writers.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't have to do math.
Yeah.
So then after that, my agent and I, that was for Ignite the Sun, which was called Sunchild at the time.
Oh.
And so she and I started editing my book in 2015, mid to the end of 2015. And then, as always seems to happen in life, lots of things kind of piled up life-wise that slowed us down. So she's a busy agent, has lots of clients, and I had some big life events. So lost my dad to cancer that same year, and then the next year started dating the man who I would eventually marry. The year after that. So yeah, it was a really busy period of years. But at the end of them, at the end of really like 4 years, was it 4 years? No, not quite 4 years. The book was finally finished and ready to go on submission to editors in late 2018. And so I had an offer at the beginning, kind of spring of 2019, from my editor, and then the book came out this August. So that's a brief synopsis of the long and rambling journey of publication. But yeah, I've loved to write for as long as I can remember, and wanted to be a writer since high school.
Wow. Were you also a very avid reader?
Yeah, definitely. I remember growing up, I'm sure, lots of libraries, maybe all libraries, do like a summer reading incentive program. And I remember kind of being vaguely disappointed that there were only so many slots for books, like that it was so easy to get the final prize. You only have to read like 5 books or something in a summer.
Yeah.
And I sort of wanted there to be more, but yeah.
You're like 5 books. That's a weekend, not a summer program.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm much slower now that I have, adult responsibilities, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
that's true. Yeah. So, and then you said that I don't know, was it with college or when something you had 3 different novels that you were working on? And then,
Yeah.
so what happened to the other
So,
2? Yeah.
yeah, they were just not good enough.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, so the first book I started writing in college was another kind of trying out my wings in a way, and I just learned a lot about how to write a book badly, and like as you write a book badly, you learn how to do it better.
Yes. Yeah.
So that book was my first attempt at getting an agent, and I figured out that wasn't going to do it. And the next book I wrote, I'm still moderately proud of it. I know that it wouldn't sell in today's market, but it was a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And it wasn't particularly original, but I loved it. And I think it was okay.
Right.
I, with that one, had a lot of agent interest, a lot of people who really liked it, but felt like it wasn't quite like sellable. There wasn't anything that was quite unique enough about it to make it really easy to sell. But I entered that in an Amazon breakthrough contest and won, I think I was a semi-finalist with that.
Oh, nice.
So that one was another learner novel, but one that I think taught me that I could do this well,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Ignite the Sun was what I wrote after that. And I mean, that's been even my third attempt book at getting published still took me almost 10 years from first draft to publication. So
Wow. Wow.
Bit of a journey.
Yeah. And then also you said it was originally called Sunchild. So who changed the title? Did you pick the new title? Did they say come up with something else, or did you one day decide no, I have something better? Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of a group effort. So I've always loved the title Sunchild. My agent, when we went on submission to editors, felt like it wasn't quite catchy enough. Like it wasn't. She was worried that the child word would dissuade teenagers. And all one word, but I could see her point. Yeah. So she and I did some brainstorming, and we came up with an alternate title that was Something Like the Sun was the title. And that's what it sold as. And then after it had sold, my editor and my agent and I all did another brainstorm for its final title. And we had a lot of options on the table. But it's kind of hard to get to please 3 people, with something that is so kind of pivotal. I mean, in a way, not that your title will sell your book always, but it does. It's one of the pieces in that puzzle of how do you sell a book. So Ignite the Sun was what we all agreed that we all 3 liked. So
yeah. Well, did most of the title options have sun somewhere in it, or did you move away from that as well?
Yeah, some of them did. I really wanted sun to be in the title because even though there's other elements of the book that are important, I felt like that was the focal point. So the title that we almost picked was A Flame to Spite the Dark. And the flame imagery is a little bit, it's hinting at sun, but it's not directly, talking about the sun. Yeah. And we didn't do that because there were a lot of other titles coming out around that time that had flame in them. So yeah, I was pleased that we came back to something that had sun in the title for sure. Yeah.
Well, Ignite the Sun is so strong sounding. So
yeah,
it definitely catches your eye. That I know everyone else, don't judge a book by its cover, don't do whatever. I totally do. I'm like, I do. A cover, a title, I definitely do, because it's your first impression. It is, and you want something that's going to catch you.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be so strong. It just has to be nice or good or something that sounds strong. Ignite the Sun sounds like we're having a story,
Yeah.
Well, good. I'm glad you found that then. So, let's actually talk a little bit, just because now that we're talking about the sun a little bit, I know that sun is a major theme in the book. So if you want to give a little bit, just a little bit about what the book is about.
Yeah, of course. So it's about a girl who has grown up. She's 16. She's grown up her whole life in this kingdom that doesn't have sunlight. So they've been under this curse of darkness. So she's never seen the sun at the beginning of the book, and she finds out kind of, this isn't much of a spoiler because it's not that far in, but she finds out pretty soon that she's actually got this sort of elemental magic connection to the sun, which may give her the unique ability to bring it back if she's willing to undergo that kind of a challenge.
First of all, A World Without Sun sounds like the saddest place ever.
I know, right? I agree.
Like, where is this taking place in Alaska? No, I'm kidding.
Right, yeah. I know. They can probably relate.
Yeah, especially wintertime, right? So, well, I don't know if you remember. It's funny because even for my book, some of them I remember exactly how I thought up the idea, or I know where the idea stemmed from, and sometimes the book just appeared
Yeah.
in my brain. Do you have that?
Yeah.
Do you know like how you thought up this idea, or was it just something that was just seemed to always just exist in your mind, and that had to be
Yeah.
written down?
Yeah. So it was kind of it was a joint effort on the part of my ideas. Sometimes this happens where you think of something clever or fun, and then you don't really know what to do with it, and so you just let it sit, and then something else kind of joins the party, and you put them together, and you realize, oh, this could work.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it was one of those. So the first seed that came was just the word sunchild, all one word. And I wanted to know what that was. And so for a while I was toying around with like kind of fairy sized people. And then after that, I remember being out walking my dog. I lived in an apartment, and so we walked twice every day. And because she had a really strong bladder, we only had to walk twice a day. But we were out, I think it was spring, and I was just really, really eager for the warmth to be back.
Oh yeah.
And on this path that we were walking on, it was pretty tree lined, and so the trees were kind of casting these stripes of shadow along the path, but there were also stripes of sunlight. And every time I would walk into the sun, it just felt like delicious, so warm and delightful. And so I found myself like feeling uplifted and just wishing that I could like leave the ground, like drift up toward the sun. And so then I started to think like, well, what would it be like if I were some kind of creature or being that could fly, but only in the sun? And so I was wondering like, if I were in the sunlight and then hit shadow, would I just immediately fall? Would I have momentum? So that was the second seed of an idea. And then the third one was, I was at work one day. I used to work at a garden center, and there was a little kid talking to his mom, and I'm sure he said something else, but what I thought I heard him say was something about the darkness, and I heard it like with a capital D, like it was an entity.
Oh.
And so then I was like, well, what would that be if there was a darkness? And then, of course, I like merged that with the sun idea, and that was my kind of hook. If sun is the power source, but there is no sun, what do we do about that? So that was where it kind of grew from.
That is so amazing. That also shows how sometimes you have to let the idea sit a little bit. Sometimes I have to like allow myself, like let the idea. I know you're excited for whatever this idea you came up with, but you have to let it sit.
Yep.
That's
absolutely.
That's fantastic. Well, I do. The one thing I did think of is as you're describing this process, I did think a little bit. I don't know if you're a fan of. I did think a little bit of Superman because he gets his like extra power from the sun. I don't know if that was in your mind at all. If you've ever even cared about Superman.
I have to confess that I haven't spent a lot of time with Superman in my life. I'm more of Marvel, a Marvel girl. I'm still not even hardcore Marvel. But the comics or the superheroes that I'm more familiar with are in that world. But I didn't know. Does Superman have a connection to the sun?
Yeah, he gets his power. He's so strong on Earth because the sun basically makes him so strong. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Look at that. See, maybe if you would have had Superman in your mind, it would have gone in a totally different direction. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe I would have felt like I was like, impinging on his rights or his originality.
Yeah, that's true. You might have thought like, oh man, this has been done before. See, so it's good that you hadn't thought of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, and that's also what's also interesting about that is that in a way it seemed like you had the title. Well, I don't know if like Sunchild came into your mind as a title or just as an idea. But I've seen also sometimes I either think I know the title and I don't know what the story is, or I know the story and I don't know what the title is, kind of.
Definitely.
But also it just goes to show it could change anyway, so.
Yeah, I know it. Yeah, and that was something that I learned late. I didn't know that I wouldn't like have full, power to decide what my title was. So yeah, that was a wake up call for me.
Oh yeah. Well, and then also for your cover, did you have any input at all with your cover, or that was just something they showed it to you and it was just like, I am bedazzled, I love it.
Yeah, I did have some. That was part of my contract negotiation on my agent's
Ah,
part, was
mm-hmm.
make sure that we had some input. I still couldn't say like, no, start over. I want something different.
Right.
But the cover that I have, which I do love, the kind of first version that they showed me was beautiful, but it was way more like kind of earth tones and rustic, and I like loved it, but it reminded me of well, it looked like an adult novel, and it looked like kind of a maybe historical Middle Eastern
Ah,
kind of novel.
yeah, yeah.
And as much as I loved it, I thought this is gonna like not throw people off, but mislead them. It's not giving off the right vibe for fantasy. So my agent and I kind of brainstormed and gave them some ideas about how they could young it up a little bit. And I think that the color additions and they added the sort of icons of the dagger and the bird and the crown and the lantern. So all of that helped, I think.
Yeah, and that's also very true because of a lot of people do read the copy or they read, the blurb on the back, and a lot of people don't. And if they're going to go into
Yeah,
the novel thinking it's something else, it doesn't matter how good your
yeah,
story is. They're just going to be disappointed because
right,
it's not what they expected.
definitely.
Yeah. Oh, that actually. So going back for a second. So after you wrote your three novels, you had this novel you were sending out. You got an agent from
Yeah,
it, and then
yeah,
now you're probably like what a bazillion edits later. When you look at what you
yeah,
first submitted to your agent and where the novel's at now, like did you even
yeah,
see that you could be getting there, or did you thought like, oh, it was so perfect when I sent it out? How can we be doing
yeah,
edits on it? And all of a sudden you're doing edits, and you're like, wait, I didn't see this coming.
yeah. Yep, definitely. I mean, and I think that's kind of, in some ways, that's how you should feel, because when you're sending out a novel to agents, you should feel like that's as good as it can be for you. Like I have done the best work that I can on this. The shocker is that after you do get an agent and they're like, no, actually, there's a lot to be done. I think for me, like, that was one of my most challenging, maybe growth points in my journey as a writer,
Right.
was to go beyond what I could do, and to have my agent say, here are a lot of things that we need to work on and change. And it was wonderful. Like, she's brilliant. And so the changes that she had suggested were all great. But it, like, yeah, for sure. I felt before that, like, this is as good as it can be. I don't know how it could be better. And then to realize, like, oh, actually, it can be loads better,
Right.
was a little bit humbling.
Yeah. Well, and also from your agent then to your editor, because your editor is going to come back with a bazillion changes. Well, maybe not a bazillion, but a
Yeah,
bunch of changes also. So,
yeah. And actually, my agent is really editorial, and not all of them are as editorial as her.
right.
And so I kind of lucked out in that a lot of the heavy lifting had to be done early. And so my my editor's first notes were something along the lines of, "This is one of the most polished novels I've ever seen,
Nice.
like at this stage."
Yeah,
So I
nice.
was like, "Well, good, because I've been working on it with her for 5 years." So
Wow. Oh, yeah, because you said a lot was
yeah,
going on during those 5 years. Right, right.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
for sure.
See, that also shows that, I know it's just crazy to think that we all think that we've got it, we got it down, and there's so many changes that
Yeah,
happens. Okay, so your agent now sends out the novel, and
yeah,
you're published now through Blink YA. So
uh-huh,
now Blink YA, for those familiar with the publisher, they have certain, I guess you could say, criteria almost for their stories. They like it to be a
yeah,
certain level of clean.
yeah.
And so was that something that from the outset you intended, oh, let's find a publisher like this? Or once the story's done, you realize, hey, this would be a good fit for Blink YA? Or like, how did that come about? Or you just got the offer from
Yeah,
them, so you had to design your book now for them, or what?
yeah. So it definitely didn't set out to write a book that would fit for them. I didn't actually hadn't like I wasn't aware of them as an imprint before we went on submission. And my agent just sort of said like, hey, there's this, this imprint. I feel like you would fit. And she submitted to, I don't know how many, 15 on that round of submissions.
Wow.
And so that was just one of the many that we had sent to. And she, okayed them all with me before she emailed those editors. But she just said, like, these are their criteria, and I think that you'd be a good fit if you're okay with me submitting to them. And so at the end of the day, actually, I had an offer from them as well as one from the imprint that became that was Harlequin YA. So the kind of irony there is I think most people's association with the word Harlequin is that it's kind of racy.
Oh, yeah.
So we have the kind of the clean imprint and then the YA version of Harlequin. So they're both through HarperCollins though. So I just chose between editors who I wanted to work with. I think Blink's clean criteria just fit well with my tendency as a writer. I don't tend to dig into the really, like, I don't know what stuff, the really gritty. My favorite books are gritty maybe in an emotional way, but not necessarily in a plot way. I don't know if that makes sense. But I like stories that dive into really challenging stuff for the characters emotionally without necessarily torturing them physically. Maybe. I don't know if that's communicating what I want to, but I think I just tend to write stories that fit that. Their criteria are that it doesn't have lots of profanity, lots of sex, or lots of not despair, but they want stories that end with hope. And that's kind of where I land. I want my stories to have hope in them and to be above all like leaving my character in a place of hope. So
that's great. So I guess that means more character driven novels than necessarily plot driven, even though sometimes when you say that, people think, oh, so there's nothing happening in the story, you're just in the character's head the whole time. It's like, no, that's not what it means. Just for emphasizing. Well, because that's also, and I saw a lot of, especially I was looking through reviews and I saw a lot of people mention that the romance is very clean. So it sounds, the way you're describing it now, it seems like, oh, it just kind of happened like that, or wasn't intentional. Because today in YA, I think because I don't know, I haven't seen a study on this yet, but this is my theory on it. Because there are so many adults that are reading YA, they're also raising the bar for what can be included in YA. And sometimes I get like a little bit jaded. I don't want to say jaded from that. I'm kind of like not impressed with it. And I'm like, come on, like, stop it. Stop. We don't have to include so many details, so much stuff. But I don't know if that was intentional on your part or just because this is how you tend to write.
Yeah, I think, well, the decision that I made, I think, was that even though there's romance in the story, it wasn't ever a story about the romance.
Right. Okay.
And so, I didn't want, she's a teenage girl, and so, yes, she is kind of hyper-focused on her feelings for this boy that she's falling in love with, but also, she's trying to save the world, and I think I can sometimes feel a little frustrated when the world is at stake and our characters only care about, getting in bed with somebody.
Yep.
And so I think I never wanted to pull the story hard toward the romance because I didn't want it to be about that. I wanted it to be included without being about it. And so I'm probably just old fashioned. I don't love sex in YA. And so, I'm just not likely to include it. But yeah, I think that's interesting because I think you're right that a lot of adults do read YA. And for me, I've seen that in the reviews that that have been critical of kind of my protagonist's, whininess or her focus on herself or on her woes, especially toward the beginning of the novel. And I just think have you ever met a teenager before?
Oh yeah.
That's just how it is when you're a teen. But I think lots of adults are reading YA.
Yes.
So they have different standards.
Yeah. And that's also because I've seen that also in the romance argument that if you've ever met a teen, if they meet a guy, they obsess over him. So I put, so the
Yeah.
writer included that in the novel. But
yeah,
I do like anyone who's listened to the podcast know I'm very biased toward cleaner romance because, come on. And there's always that moment where it's like a big battle and bullets are whizzing and all of a sudden there's a big kiss and you're like, hello, someone's about to die.
Right.
What are you doing?
It was programmed.
Yeah. Now's not the time for such things. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
So that's also that you chose to write for YA. Is that something you kind of fell into, or just deliberately chose to write for teenagers, like as a conscious thing?
Yeah, maybe both. I think, well, yeah, a bit of both. I mean, I love reading that genre. But for me, one of the kind of turning points in deciding what I wanted to write and who for, was seeing, as a college student, seeing the impact that Harry Potter had on people's reading life.
Oh, wow.
And realizing that I think, especially in the age group where you decide whether or not you're a reader, I don't think intentionally, but so many kids in high school, they get this reading list of books that they think are absolutely the most boring thing they've ever encountered.
Yep.
And then like reading becomes associated with that.
Yeah.
And then, you see people like leaving reading behind or just thinking that it's not for them, or and there's loads that's pulling at teenagers like attention and time, and so to choose reading, I think is kind of hard when you're that age, but it impacts your reading life forever, because that's when you begin to form who you are. So I really wanted to contribute books to the side of the fence that like propelled kids into reading instead of away. And so that was where my sort of decision to write for young people originated. But I also think that young people are just like so interesting, and that time of life of coming of age and figuring out who you are, like that's just so interesting to write about, because it's more tumultuous than any other time of your life, really.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Yeah. Also because there's much more passion and ambition usually. They haven't gotten tired yet.
Yeah, right.
They're much more motivated to do stuff.
Yeah.
Going back for a second, you said something about reviews. So they always tell authors not to read reviews, but I don't know if I can speak for most authors, but like I totally read reviews. Or I glance through them. Well, sometimes I do get good stuff out of it because then I realize how my stuff is landing. But when you did see some of your reviews, was it more of, oh, that's interesting, or wow, you didn't get the book, or what were kind of your reactions to that?
Yeah, so I have been intentional about not reading really bad reviews, just because I don't get anything out of it. And I also have this sort of combative streak where I just want to like rebuttal.
Yeah,
And since there's not a way, or if there is a way, it's not a good idea to do that as an author.
Yeah.
I find that reading the really bad ones are just not helpful to me at all. But I anybody wants to read positive stuff about their book. So I will occasionally, I don't make it a regular practice, but I occasionally will go to Amazon and, see if there's anything new. And if they're positive, I'll read them. Goodreads, I'm a little bit more hesitant about, just because there's more reviews and some of them are just really negative and brutal. So I have like a cautiously intrigued outlook on reviews. I'm not like 100% against reading them, but I'm also not all in.
Yeah, I hear that. There's also always the moment where it's someone you don't know who wrote a positive review, and you're like, "Hey, this person isn't my friend, and they liked it." Yeah,
cool. I did something right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I won't. I'll refer people back. I had an episode. I don't remember what number it was with her. So her name is Becky Sprafford, and she says she teaches librarians reader awareness and things like that. And she actually tells the people that she's training to go to Goodreads and to look at either like the number 2s and the number 4s, kind of like look at the range of reviews. Yeah. Well, she said she did mention also that sometimes you have these negative reviews that it's not necessarily on the story. It's just the readers. You know, if their expectations were met, which doesn't have anything to do with what the writers did. It's just because, I thought I wanted to read a story like this and it wasn't like this. Well, okay. Well, that's right. So that's interesting that, because even sometimes before I'll buy a book, I'll go to Goodreads and I'll go through it.
Yeah.
But I also
Same.
do purposely look at both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've also found, and this has actually made me less inclined to read reviews on Goodreads before I buy a book. But I found that if I read a negative review about something, then I'm like more inclined to notice that negative thing when I'm reading.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
so I like often if I've already read a book and then I go back and read a negative review, I'll think, well, I can kind of see that, but my feelings of positivity toward the book kind of overwhelm it. And so I'm not bogged down by whatever that person saw that was negative.
Yeah.
But if I haven't read the book and I read the bad review first, then it's like, that's all I can see, you know? And I don't think that's good for like actually figuring out what I think, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. Well, then also sometimes you have to know, like they might say, oh, this felt so typical, but you don't know what books they read leading up to that book.
Yeah.
They could have read 10 books
Yeah.
that were the exact same thing, and there's thousands of books to
Yeah.
choose from. So
Yeah, totally.
yeah, and
Totally.
if you didn't read 10 books of the exact, quote unquote, the exact same thing,
Yeah.
then you
Yeah,
wouldn't
I
feel
know.
that way. You'd love the story. Yeah.
Yeah, typical, but from your experience, but not mine.
Yeah. That's why also, I mean, we just went off on a total tangent, but whatever. That's why,
Yeah.
I don't leave so many reviews also because I know people, they like to, oh, what are you reading? Or, oh, because someone's
Yeah.
the professional. We have to know what the professional's saying. But it's like,
Yeah.
I'm looking at it differently. And B, sometimes I didn't exactly love X, but did I still overall enjoy the read? So I don't know. I feel like I don't want to, like, I don't like leaving reviews so much because I don't feel like it's going to come out right almost.
Yeah.
And I would recommend the book based on you, not based on me also. So
Yeah.
that doesn't come off in a
Yeah.
review. So
Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
definitely tend to, if I have a reader that I trust, a friend that I trust who likes similar things to me, those are the reviews that I look for on Goodreads. If it's friends that I know or whatever, but everybody has different favorite books, and
Yep.
there are people out there that don't like my favorite books, and so why would I ever want to listen to their review
Yeah.
on something else?
Yeah.
But you don't know who those people are.
Right. Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So that's okay. We'll go back to your book for a second now, and then
Sure.
and then we almost have to wrap up. So just when you're first of all, are you reading a lot of YA fantasy now while you're writing, or while you're writing you go off, you're reading a totally different genre or age group just to not interfere? Like how does that work with you?
Yeah, I actually don't have very many hard and fast rules about what I read when I write. The one thing that I have tried to avoid when I was writing Ignite the Sun, there was a book that someone had recommended to me who had a protagonist or a love interest named Lyndon, which is my love interest name in Ignite the Sun.
Yeah.
And so I deliberately didn't read that. I also didn't read Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo because
Yep.
someone had told me that the sort of powers in that book were similar to mine. And so both of those I avoided until I was done with Ignite the Sun. But in general, just because I like it this way, I try and keep a bit of a mix going.
Yeah.
I like to read YA fantasy, but I also like to mix that up with middle grade. My favorite, palette cleanser are old Newberries. I love going to the thrift store and finding old Newbery winners that I've never heard of and reading those because they're just always like a delight.
Yeah.
So I like to mix up kind of old and new, and then YA and middle grade, and then I'll throw in some contemporary YA just to kind of shake things up even more and kind of get my brain going a different direction. But that's more just general, I think, for me, mental well-being is to have a mix of stuff so that I'm not just always living in one genre world.
Oh yeah, for sure. And then you always see things in the other genre worlds. You're like, oh, it's an intro. I wonder if I could do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Did you end up reading the books that you stayed away from while you were writing? Did you end up going back to read them to see how those authors, like what they chose to do with their stories, or you haven't necessarily gotten around to those yet?
I did read Shadow and Bone. I still haven't read the one that had the Lincoln guy in it. I think that was the Chemical Garden series.
Right.
Is that right?
I don't know.
And I don't remember. The first one is called, what's it called? I don't remember. I own it. I just haven't read it yet. I almost picked it up one day, but it's about polygamy. There's a
Ooh.
polygamous element to it, and I wasn't in the mood, so I
Yeah.
didn't read it.
Yeah, you gotta be, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you end up seeing if Shadow and Bone, were there similarities there? Or it was like, oh, that's an
Yeah.
interesting way to do things? Yeah.
Yeah. They're definitely, so I don't know if you've read it, but the main character's um, power is for sunlight, with sunlight.
Ah,
And I felt when I was reading it, it's a totally different world from mine, and a different premise for sure. I felt like her focus was just different than mine.
yeah, great. Yeah.
So I'm really focused on the sun and on the light and on the kind of emotional and probably metaphorical power of light in my book. And in Shadow and Bone, the sunlight is more incidental, sort of. Like, the main character doesn't have like any kind of emotional tie to it. It's just kind of her power.
Right. Okay.
So I felt like the heart of her book was just totally different from mine, which meant that I probably could have read it and it would have been fine.
Yeah, well, you don't. First of all, you don't know, and second of all, that's good because that would have meant that, oh, great, I just spent so much time on this novel that I might have to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to feel that way either. So.
Yeah, that almost happened to me with the book that I was writing, and then someone told me it was like, if I stay, and I was like, oh God, I just finished writing this. I'm not. So I actually did read it then before, even before my book was signed, just to confirm that I wasn't sending out a book that had already been like, oh, I have such a great idea.
Right.
Like, nope, it's been done before. So that also, thank God it was different, and I didn't have to worry about that. And it was interesting to see how we can have the same sort of seed somewhere, and then it grows something totally different.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, which is amazing. I think there's bazillions of books out there. Some of them they're so similar, but they're not the same. So.
Yeah, it's wild the way ideas. Yeah, the way people think of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man. Okay, we're like a little bit more over time than I thought. Okay. There's so much to talk about. But we'll wrap up. So I always love to wrap up with filling in the blank of, I love it when either writers or publishers, or you can do librarian, whatever you want to fill in there, do X, and I don't love it when they do X. So how would you fill in those blanks? So
my answers are they're connected to each other.
Okay.
So I hope it's not cheating by giving kind of the same advice. But I love it when authors and publishers follow their loves when they write or publish things that they just are passionate about, that they care about, that they want. Doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. I want to tell this story and I love it, or I want to publish this story and I love it. Yeah. I don't like it, or I hate it, when authors and publishers follow trends exclusively. When you see someone writing something or acquiring something just because it's hot, I think, to me, that just feels inauthentic and kind of without heart.
Good answers.
That's where I'm gonna fall.
Yeah, those are great answers. I don't know how much you could tell us now, but are you working? Are you ready? How far are you on your next book already?
Yeah, I am working on it. And I can't say much about it because I don't yet know how tenable and viable it is. We haven't sold it yet, but I'm really enjoying it, and it's not on trend as a follow up to my answer to that question.
Good.
Definitely a weird heart love book, but
that's exciting. Well, so does that mean you're not necessarily returning to the world of Ignite the Sun, or not yet, or you're not thinking of that?
Yeah, not yet. It only sold as a standalone. So if someday my publisher wants to buy a follow-up, I would love to write more.
Right.
But for now, it's just going to be its own little thing. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, is a part of you happy to move on to a different world? I mean, I'm sure you're going to always love that world, but some authors stay in the same world for forever. And sometimes I'm
forever,
yeah.
Some literally stay forever.
Yeah. And I'm like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
Do you want to go somewhere else? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you pour so much work into building a world. I can see the draw of just wanting to stay there and just keep deepening it,
Oh yeah.
Uh, and I think that would be fun, but it has been so much fun to get out of that world and to write something different.
That's fantastic. That's great. Well, whatever it is, I hope we'll see it, and good luck with at least as long as you're enjoying the journey. Also, of writing it.
Yeah, right.
That's great. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
thank you.
So also, Hannah, thank you so much for joining us. And as we said, your information will be in the episode notes for everyone to check out. And yeah, I hope everyone does go and check it out.
Yeah.
So go
Thank
ignite
you
the
so much for
sun.
having
Yeah.
me.
Oh my gosh, I feel like that could be a motto. Go ignite the sun. Okay, I made it a motto now.
Yeah.
Go forth, people. This was a bonus episode of Oh My Word featuring author Hanna C. Howard. To find out more about Hannah and her work, please visit the link in the episode notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Oh My Word podcast and leave us a starry star review. To keep track of what we're up to and to find out about upcoming episodes, please follow us on Instagram, Oh My Word podcast, or visit el10ofm.com. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.